Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Betsy. Hi, everybody.
David.
So welcome to our second episode of the Global Spotlight and my first episode because I had an unexpected situation occur last time and I wound up missing and left Betsy and Sandy defend for themselves. But I am here today and we are going to get started with our first true episode. Last time was kind of an introduction, but this time we're going to get into some depths into one of our many nations and also kind of a little how-to towards the end. So what I want to do first, I'm looking down the list of people in the chat room, and I recognize most of the names, but I'm going to assume there may be some people who are brand new to the Global Project. So if those of you that are very familiar with us could bear with us just briefly, I'm going to give a little bit of background on the project and an update on where things stand right now. The Global Project, if we can actually, Betsy, can we pull the Global Project screen up?
Absolutely.
The Global Project stemmed from last year's 15 Nations tour. That was a project where every 3 weeks we selected a new country, what I call genealogically obscure country, meaning they may not be obscure in the world, but they are obscure in the world of genealogy, countries that we don't see very often. If you go to your local bookstore, you can probably find books on Scandinavian genealogy, English, German, French genealogy. You're not going to find Zimbabwean genealogy books. You're not going to find Azerbaijani books. But people have family from there. And there's not a lot of easy to find places to go to do that research. So we did the 15 Nations tour. Every 3 weeks we picked another country and we traced the roots of 15 individuals from that country. But the fun part of it, the cool part of it was that on day one, we had no idea what we were doing. With each country, it was brand new. We had no list of resources. It was up to our team to figure it out. And by the end of the third week, we generally had, we had anywhere from 1 to, I believe 14 was our most successful country, 1 to 14 notables connected to the big tree. So not only were we able to do the research, but we were able to find the links to get them onto the tree as it currently stands. So that was really a fun year-long adventure that we had. When it was over, it was a lot of work, and I couldn't maintain a whole nother year of it. But what we decided to do was put in something permanent, and we created this Global Project. The Global Project will eventually have a project page for every country of the world, and the list of countries that we're using includes 199 countries. 24 of those countries are already overseen by top-tier projects, and we're not messing with those countries at all. Those people have their act together already, and we're leaving them alone. But we do have links to their pages on our site. So if you want to do English research or French research, you can get a link from the Global Project.
David, where would
okay? So if you click on the country, let me give a little side note here. In the center there, you see worldwide projects.
Mm-hmm.
We also oversee, we're the umbrella project for any project that doesn't have a parent project. So anybody that starts a small project that doesn't fit into the French project or the Notables project or any of the other categories, those will go under worldwide project. And right now we have two. We have first responders, and we have Remember the Children. Those are global projects in the sense that they cover the entire world, but they don't quite fit under any other project, parent project, and they're not quite big enough to be top-tier projects on their own. So that's why they go here. So if anybody were to start a project, didn't know where to go, you can contact us, and if we can't find your place, we'll put you here on the worldwide projects. But if we go over to the next tab on the country projects, you're going to see a list of, again, 199 countries. Okay. Before you scroll down there, though, Betsy, let's go to the very top, and there's a green link that says "click here." Right there. If you click on that, you're going to get just the top tier projects.
Got it.
Okay. So this is the 24, I believe it's 24 countries that currently have their own project. They were completely independent of the global project. But again, we do provide the links here. If, so if you're not clear if it's a top tier project or not, don't worry about it. If you click on it, it'll take you to their page and you'll see from there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Great.
So again, if we go back to the prior page,
yep.
This is a list of all 199. Again, you will find the top tier projects on this page as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're identified with an asterisk, but if you're looking for a complete list, go to the other page. And we basically have right now 2 sets of countries. We have countries that have leaders and countries that don't. The pages that don't have leaders, we're going to talk about those today, are still up and have a ton of information that you can use if you're interested in doing research in that country. They don't have a community pulled together yet. You're not going to have people to work with immediately, but eventually in time, we hope to get people into most of these countries, if not all of them, and form some communities. But the pages themselves are great resources, even if you don't have a community. Now, right now, we have about 25 countries that have gained leaders since January 1st. So that brings us up from the original 24 top tier countries up to about 50 countries now that have leadership. So that's not too shabby for what's it been 6 weeks since we opened.
Great.
We have about 75 countries that have pages. So you'll see any country there that's in bold has a page. If it's underlined, well, I'm sorry, no, it's bold, it's underlined, it's the same thing. So again, we have about 75 countries that have pages that you can now visit. If it's not bold, it means that the pages are still in process. Mm-hmm. I was hoping to have them all up by January 1st, but it turned out to be a much slower process than I thought. It's not just coming up with all the information, but typing it in and creating all the links and getting the graphics in and that. So, a page can take a day or two, depending on the country. And when I say a page, it's actually 4 pages per country. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about 800 pages of material.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
it's a lot. Yeah. So today, if anybody has any questions on the global project in general, let us know. But today, we are going to have one of our project leaders, which is Betsy Ko, who has graciously accepted the leadership of Taiwan. She's going to take us through the Taiwan project, and we're coming at this from 2 angles. We want you to learn a little bit about Taiwan. That's the theme of today's episode. But realize that what Betsy shows you on the Taiwan project is going to be very similar to what you're going to find on any of the other country projects. The template is the same. When I create the project, I use the same format. The data changes, but the format stays the same. Once a leader takes over and members start joining, they're free to make pretty much whatever changes they want. So over time, some of these countries may take their own direction as far as their formatting and what they include and what they don't include. But for right now, you're going to find pretty much the same thing on any page. And then the one last thing I want to say before we move on to Taiwan is that if anybody's interested in managing a country, again, I told you we have about 50 countries already adopted. Some of them, some people have adopted more than one country, so it's not necessarily 50 individuals. But I'm sorry, it's 25 new countries and then the 25 top tier countries. But if you're interested in leading, let me know. Yeah, you just drop me an email and I can get back with you and talk about what it entails. If you're not interested in leading a country, but you want to join in the membership, even if we don't have a leader, we can still put you down as a member. And as the community grows, you'll already be signed up for that. And then third, if you're not interested in being a member or a leader, realize that anybody can visit these pages. So even if you're not signed up, or you just have a passing interest and want to spend a couple hours looking through a country, It's all accessible to anybody. So you don't necessarily have to be a member to take advantage of it. The other thing is, it may not be your family that you're going to need to do the research for, but I know a lot of people work with the Notables Project, and we have notables from around the world. You might have a friend or relative or neighbor that is interested. This is a place you can send them. What we're really hoping, I think what makes this project unique across the internet, there are places that have, there are very few, but there are a couple sites that have data for obscure countries, but they don't have a team for every country. So you're not going to find a community along with the genealogical resources and information all in one place for every country of the world. I don't know that there's any place else that has that. And that's what, I'm really excited over time that this is going to be able to grow into, and really kind of be a way for WikiTree to distinguish itself beyond the ways that it already does. So shall we head on over to Taiwan?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And before we launch officially into talking about Taiwan, I just want to take a moment to thank David and really emphasize the Herculean amount of work that he's done. And I have had a personal interest in seeing a Taiwan project on WikiTree for some time now, but it always kind of stayed a little lower on the list because it just felt so intimidating. So what David has done by starting the global project and providing that infrastructure, where I was able to start out with these wonderful resource pages, not just for myself, but to offer other members, future members of the project. I mean, that's just, I'm so grateful for that, David, because I think if it hadn't have been for that, that goal would have, been a long time coming for me.
Well, and in turn, I want to thank the team I had on the 50 Nations, because it was the work that they did that made me realize this was possible. I see several of our members are in the chat right now, but had you come to me last year and suggested this idea, I would have thought it was crazy. It's like, I don't know how to do this. But that was kind of what we realized, was that we don't know how to do it because the information is not out there, easily findable, but it is out there. And the successes the team had on the 50 Nations led us to realize that this is actually doable. And I'm found, I'm at this point, I'm going somewhat alphabetically, and I've finished all the A, B, and C countries. So everything from Albania to Azerbaijan to Cameroon, and there's resources out there for every one of those countries. It's just not well known. Mm-hmm. So, and again, a year ago, I wouldn't have assumed that. But having been through the 50 Nations and seen what people could do and the resources that they were able to find, I realized, we could do this for every country in the world. There's no reason not to. And I don't think anybody else out there is really doing it in the way that we're doing it. And we'll talk about some of the sites out there that are doing it, because I think they complement us. They don't necessarily, I don't see them as rivals or competitors as much as additional resources that we can use. But the information is out there, no matter where you're searching. There's information. We'll talk about the different types of information, because if you want to know where your Taiwanese ancestors lived in 1450, you're probably not going to find a lot of names and dates and places, but you can still learn about the history, and that's out there. So we'll talk about that too as we get a little further into the show.
And I saw a few people in the chat wondering, how do I join the global project? So I just put the link to the G2G post in the chat. It's just like any other project. You just respond to the G2G post, and David and or Alan or Steve will get a badge on your profile.
Yeah, and you can join the global project as a whole. Mm-hmm. Right now, we're focusing on the countries. We have talks about certain projects, sub-projects that we can do that are global in nature. We've talked about doing a foreign language project, a name project. So, for example, if you have an Arabic country, the naming patterns may be the same in several different countries. So, rather than individually researching that in each of the countries, we may have a group that studies Arabic names and Arabic language, and how that can apply to all the different groups. So we'll broaden out over time into global topics, but right now, because it's basically just me and I'm still got 100 and some odd countries to develop, we're not there yet. But that is something we're going to look to bring some additional leaders on and maybe develop that. So again, you can join the global project as a whole, but there's not a lot of activity there. The activity is going to be in the individual countries. So if you've got an interest in the countries, that you'll still join the global project, but let us know what country you want to be part of, and we'll get you on the list. And you could be as part of as many countries as you'd like to be. There's no limit there.
Great. Well, I'll just start by giving just a little bit of a personal introduction. So I am half Taiwanese. My father was born and raised in Taipei and came to the United States in the 1950s. And my mother's American. And, I was completely born and raised here in the States. And my early impressions of Taiwan, I mean, I understood that my father came from someplace far, far away. None of his family lived nearby. My grandfather did come for a couple of visits. Here we are in my home in New York when I was growing up. But outside of that, I really didn't appreciate my heritage. And it's been a journey, really, in fits and spurts. I made my first trip to Taiwan when I was in high school, early 80s. That was very interesting because things were still very much, there was a different feel given the political climate compared to when I spent a summer there. I lived there for a summer in 1995, and I had the opportunity I'm sorry, I lived there a few years later in the 80s, and things were starting to loosen up. I had an opportunity to study Mandarin, and my Mandarin is not wonderful. And I think that with the Asian countries, that is, people feel like that's a barrier. But there definitely, I don't want let that to stand in my way. I think like with genealogy of any foreign country, if you know a few key things, that's going to be a big help in, recognize the word for baptism or for marriage. It's going to take you part of the way to where you want to go. Just as an example, we'll return to my grandfather's profile. And so what I've done, he did calligraphy. And so you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got some numbers, 10, 3, because this scroll is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And down here, we've got numbers 79, 7, 10, 9. So which was the year he did it, 1979. So if you know your numbers, that can be extremely helpful. That's not too bad, 10 pictograms. And then his name here. So I have, even though despite the fact that I have, I'm American through and through, I feel very closely drawn. I feel my identity as a Taiwanese person, even though I'm only half, but it's still a place that's very dear to me. So, and I'd also like to say that with the global projects, any of the country projects, you don't have to be ethnically that that whatever the country is, if you have visited there, if you have friends there, if you enjoy, maybe you've never even been there, but you enjoy cultural things that you have experienced here outside of the country, but you are intrigued by it. Those are all great reasons to pick a country to be involved in. And so let's dive into the pages that David constructed. So as he said, there's multiple pages for each country. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to these tabs. So right now I'm going to go to the
Can you go back to the global homepage
Sure.
and access it from the
Oh,
links?
absolutely.
To show them right from the beginning. If you go to the global project, you're going to see 3 tabs up there, and you're going to click on the country projects,
Right.
and that's where you'll get your alphabetized list of countries.
Right.
And if it's bolden, that means we have active pages. If it's not bold, they're still pending.
Right. So there I am. I've made it to the T's. Great.
And Betsy, just scroll down, but at the top, there's the letters of the alphabet. If you click on the T, it'll take you right down to the bottom. It's not that far to scroll down, but if you want a shortcut, it saves you 2 seconds.
Okay. So here we have your basic need to know the mission of the project, to provide members who share an interest in Taiwanese genealogy with a hub from which to research, learn, and grow alongside others with the same geographic and genealogical interests. So you would, I'm going to be putting up a G2G post for the project later today. And just like any other project, you'll want to follow the tag Taiwan to be looped into all communications.
I would recommend that you follow the tag Taiwan and then also the tag global, so you'll get the general information on the project.
Yes.
We do not have badges for every country, so you'll get a global badge. You won't get a Taiwan badge at this point, but you will get the global badge.
Right now, there are only 5 people in all of WikiTree following the Taiwan tag. So
it's new.
Yep. So looking forward to seeing that reach double and maybe even triple digits. We'll see.
And one other little pointer here on this screen, if you'll scroll down just a tiny bit. Well, actually, you're there. In that box, you'll see where it says Coordinator Betsy Co. If you go to a country page and that coordinator's spot is empty, that means we're still looking for someone. So if we have a coordinator, their name will be there. If we don't, that'll be empty. And if you're interested, again, drop me a note and we'll get you hooked up.
Yeah. And when I do the G2G post, when it's completed, I'll link it here as well.
Okay. And Alice is asking a question right now about adding the global tag. Just for clarification, when you add a tag, you get direct. You have an abbreviated G2G thread. Is that what we call it? That you receive based on the tags that you choose. So if you want to make sure you get any messages regarding Taiwan, let's say, you're going to want to add the Taiwan tag. If you want to get the general messages from the global project, you want to add the global tag. You don't have to add those, but that's what will get you. That's what will make sure that you receive any messages that we post for either the country project or the global project as a whole.
Yeah. So goals to collaborate, bring like-minded WikiTreeers together so that we can collaborate. As with all our profiles, in this case, to make every Taiwanese profile on WikiTree the best that it can be, to provide a single hub where we can gather all the resources that we're aware of and information that helps us build and document the profiles, and to help the members of the project gain skill and expertise in researching Taiwanese family history, and to help those we're looking, hopefully, ideally, we'll have members of all different levels. And I may be a tiny bit farther along, but I know that I have a great deal that I still need to learn. So I'm excited to learn it. So let's go on to the next tab. On this Taiwan tab, David has put together things about location, administrative divisions. You know, anyone who's ever dove into an unfamiliar country realizes pretty quickly you have to understand how that country organizes its
Yes.
area, you know, whether it's counties or provinces or states. So,
Yeah, because depending on the country, that's often where the records are going to be
right,
held.
right.
So you're going to want to know that.
Yep.
And also, you may read that your ancestor was from this region or that region. If you don't know what a region is in that country, is it a county? Is it a district? Is it a there's all kinds of different terminology they use.
Right.
So that's helpful. And you can take that information and go back to Wikipedia, and usually the various counties, districts, etc., will have their own articles. And sometimes those districts are created based on ethnical breakdowns, cultural breakdowns. So sometimes you can learn a lot about your ancestors' life just by knowing what part of the country they were from. Were they farmers? Were they city dwellers? You know, that alone is tells you something. Right.
And I was even reading earlier today, many Taiwanese came over from Fujian in mainland China during the 1700s, 1800s. So if you're looking for records prior to that date with your family who came over from Fujian, they might be in Fujian. So yeah, it's you gotta know where to look depending on when you are searching. And there's a very helpful graphic that I'll show in a few minutes to do with that. David's given us some history, which is important to understanding the individuals you're researching and how their lives were affected.
Particularly if the country borders changed or the names of the country changed.
Right. For instance, many people may not be aware that Taiwan was formerly called Formosa because it was a Portuguese colony back in, the 1600s. And that meant beautiful country. And so it was being referred to as Formosa even, into the 20th century. That name sort of persisted.
Yeah, and until I put this together, I didn't know that. I've heard of Formosa and I've heard of Taiwan, but I had no idea they were the same place.
Yeah.
So,
and I didn't realize this. You put this here somewhere. You put that, maybe it was on the next page, that very close variation of Taiwan was what the British called it. That the Portuguese called it Formosa, but the British called it Taiwan or something like that. So I never knew where Taiwan itself came from. And of course, the other official name is the Republic of China. David talks about the different ethnic groups. There are sort of two large subgroups who are ethnically Chinese. Well, actually three. This third group, the Weishengrun, are those who came over from mainland China after the Civil War in the mid-20th century. And then there's indigenous people as well. Who there's been a large resurgence in the last decade or two of celebrating their identities and culture. Mandarin is the official language of Taiwan, but there's also Taiwanese and some other subdialects. They all share the same characters. Just to give an example, my last name, if you showed the character to someone and said, how do you say this in Mandarin, it would be ke. But if you showed it to a Taiwanese speaker, it would be gua. So you have to be very sort of flexible and a little knowledgeable to know that these dialects can change things a little bit, and so can transliteration. For instance, I mentioned Fujian, which can be spelled with a J, Fujian, or you can also see it as Fujian with a K. So tread a little slowly, and just know that, I mean, when you go to transliterate a language like Chinese, there are different systems, and there are going to be a few little variations. So this is a really good page to read thoroughly, and David links to Wikipedia articles for a deeper dive in some of these topics. Yeah.
So a bit of a disclaimer on these pages is when I put these pages together, I basically spend an afternoon researching the country, and then I spend the evening pulling the page together. That afternoon of research doesn't really make me an expert on the country. So these pages are very rudimentary. Primarily, they're intended as a template. I hope to get the gist of it correct. But you may find that there are errors or things that, if not errors, maybe just not as detailed as they need to be. So that's where the team is supposed to come in. We're looking for people to come in and elaborate on what I've presented here in a basic form. I would put this probably at a maybe a middle school level of information, which I sometimes appreciate having a middle school explanation rather than a college thesis level explanation. But it is, be prepared that this is real basic. For example, the naming conventions. I put down some information that I was able to gather, but I'm sure it's much more complicated. And you may want to even put, as a team, develop a whole separate page just for naming conventions, or for languages, or information on specific ethnic groups. So our hope is that these pages will blossom into something much bigger. This is not the final phase. This is the initial phase. When you go back to the history section, it certainly doesn't cover the entire history of Taiwan, but it does give the beginner an idea. For example, that it used to be called Formosa. That's that's a real basic piece of information that's helpful to have. So we try to get that in there, but I just want people to know that we recognize that this is very rudimentary information. Again, hopefully we'll be able to develop teams for these countries who can bring in greater expertise than I have and flesh them out into something much more.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great start. The page is a great starting place. And I didn't know 100% of everything on the page, or you allowed me to refresh my memory on some details that had gotten a little foggy. So it's great. What I've also done is I've started a free space page, which I will, right now it's locked down because I'm still working on it, but I'll unlock it shortly. Resources for understanding Taiwan, and just recognizing that everybody has a different way in which they like to learn. So I've sorted these out into fiction, nonfiction, podcasts. I think I'll add in maybe YouTube channels. Maybe that could go under social media accounts, movies. As you can see, it's still under construction. But these are content that you can consume in order to better understand the history, and then the culture, and particularly if you're researching people who have lived more recently, Taiwanese people, to understand sort of the vibe of the country. So like for instance, this podcast, Hearts in Taiwan, the two people who do that are second generation Taiwanese like me. So their perspective, talking to their parents and visiting. And, I think all of it collectively provides a well-informed perspective on the country. So that is coming up soon. Let's see. Going back, now let's take a look at the resources page. So again, David has here articles on Wikipedia related to Taiwan. Yeah.
We're not seeing your
Oh,
screen if
sorry,
you're showing
sorry.
it. But can we do the people page first, and then we'll
Okay.
end with the resources?
Okay. Sounds
I
good.
think that's going to take a little bit of time.
Okay.
Just real quickly, if we show what we've got here on the people page, so people know.
Yep. Okay.
And again, the format's the same on all of our country pages. We have at the top, we list the head of state and the head of government. Some countries that's 2 people, some it's 1.
Right.
Some it's a king, some it's a president, but we have the current leaders listed there.
And there will be a change in president come spring.
Coming soon, yeah. So keeping up to date, you might find if they've had a recent change, if nobody's actively managing the project, it may take us a while to find that out and get that changed. But as of the day that the page is created, those are the current rulers. And then every country, if they've ever had a monarchy, I list the last monarch. So in this case, we're going back to the 1800s. For a lot of our European countries, we're just going back to the 1940s, World War II, when a lot of the monarchies fell. And some countries didn't have a monarch, haven't had a monarchy in hundreds of years. And we're going back to maybe the 1400s or so. But if they ever had a monarchy, I include a little blurb on it and then list the most recent monarch. Typically, if you go to that monarch's profile page, we have succession boxes where you can scroll back one generation of monarchs after the other. We don't have that here. I don't know how many of the ancient, not real ancient, but the 1800s monarchs we have profiles for. But typically, if you go to King Charles's web profile page, there'll be a link to Queen Elizabeth, and there'll be a link to her father and his father, and so on, going back. Which is why we don't put all the monarchs on the page. Once you get the first one, you can scroll through to go back as far as you need to. And then we just have a few, just for interest. There's no rhyme or reason other than these are important people in Taiwanese history. Some are connected, some are not. It's not a challenge. It's not a project. It's just interesting people from the country. A team is free to change these out if you've got other people you'd like to put in. Some are Taiwanese, famous in Taiwan. Others, as you see down here, are famous Americans who happen to be from Taiwan. But they're just interesting people who you might want to read up on. Some of them need profiles written. Some of them need connections. So if you want to kind of turn it into a little challenge, that's fine. But the purpose is just to highlight some of the interesting people from the country. Some countries, we've got our South Pacific Island countries that don't have a whole lot of world-known celebrities. So we're coming up with several is a little bit of a challenge. And then you got others. I was working on Italy yesterday, where they've got Michelangelo and so on and so on. It's not hard at all to find notables. Taiwan's a small country, but they're also a very powerful country in a way. So they do have a global presence.
And some of these are there because they're living. The profiles are not. I couldn't see them. Who was it? Like I couldn't see Wan Ti Lee's profile.
Okay, that we can fix, because if they're on here, it means they're qualified as living notables, so they should be visible. If they're not, it's just an oversight.
Okay.
I know Betsy probably knows this is, we can see things that the membership can't. So sometimes the pages look perfectly fine to us, and we don't realize that the general membership doesn't. Or if you're a profile manager, you can see everything on that profile, but if the profile's locked, nobody else can see it. So it looks fine to you, But if you're not paying attention, you don't realize that not everybody else can see what you can see.
Mhm.
So I'll take a look at those and make sure that they're all open if they're not already.
Great. Okay. All right.
So you won't be able to edit them because they're living individuals.
Yeah.
But if we can find out the parents or deceased relatives, we can we can build out their trees based on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Should we go to
All right,
resources?
so we go to resources now. This is the final tab. What you see there that says global homepage is the final tab. That just takes you back to the main page. So we're really looking at 4 pages of content and then a 5th tab taking you back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so resources. So let's move into our how-to component. Today, what I want to talk about today is basically what do you do, and this is what we learned with our 15 Nations project. What do you do when you are needing to do research in a country that you know absolutely nothing about? Where do you begin? And that's what we had to figure out with the 15 Nations tour. And that's what we're hoping to make a little easier for you with these pages here. But right now, if it happens to be one of the pages we have set up already, you can come to this resources page and it'll give you a start. If not, you can follow this same formula for any of the countries that we don't have pages up yet. The first place that I always go is Wikipedia, because it'll give you a very good summary of the country. All that stuff that I showed you before, you're going to give in more detail, or that Betsy showed you, I should say. You're going to get an even greater detail on Wikipedia, but you're not going to get overwhelmed with technicalities. You're going to get a real simple primer that'll just kind of get your head in a place where you understand the basics of what you need to know going into the country. They'll tell you about the history, they'll tell you the geography, again, all the stuff we had on the earlier pages, the ethnicities, the religions. They'll go into a lot of modern stuff too that we've left out. They'll talk about the current government. They'll talk about entertainment and sports and things that don't necessarily help us with genealogy, but are still might be of interest to you. But that's where I always start, is just go to Wikipedia and it's kind of like when I was a kid, I'd open up the encyclopedia. The teacher would always say, well, the encyclopedia isn't an acceptable reference, but it's certainly a good place to start to get a kind of a grasp on the topic you're looking at. I showed my almanac to some kids the other day, and they said, "What's the almanac?" And I said, "It's kind of like the print version of the internet."
It's a good way to describe it.
But then these next sources, this is kind of the steps that I do. I go to Family Search and I go to Ancestry. If you have an Ancestry subscription, great. If you don't, you're not going to get as much there. But Family Search has their own wiki. And a wiki, if you're not clear on what a wiki is, it basically means it's like a crowdsourced encyclopedia, if you will. It can be on any topic. Family Search's topic is genealogy, and they have information on every country of the world. As I said before, I don't see them as a competitor here. I see this as a real great supplement to what we're doing. We don't have to pull all this information over to WikiTree, because it's here on the Family Search wiki, and they provide. Again, they claim to have information on 250 countries. I don't know 250 countries. I only know 200, so I'm not sure how they define country, but they probably have some that are more dependencies and territories and those kinds of things. But it's a great starter resource. Now, because it's a wiki, it means the community contributes, and it's only as good as what people post. So it's not 100% accurate all the time. Some countries have much more information than other countries. If you're looking for research in Sweden or the Netherlands, you're going to get a whole lot of information broken down probably to their county level, to the city level, to small towns and hamlets even. If you're looking for information on Azerbaijan, that's one I always use because it's a fun name to say. But it's not something that there's probably as much information. If you're looking for information on Afghanistan, It's a well-known country, but with the Taliban in place and all of that, you're not going to get as much information. So, but that doesn't mean there aren't resources out there, and Family Search is a great place to start looking for that. And they also have their own records. So not only their wiki will take you to places off of Family Search. It'll take you, it'll provide you links to other websites, but it'll also give you information on offline resources. But they also give you links to their own records. So if they have records on Chinese genealogy or whatever country it is you're looking for, you'll find information on that here as well. The big sites, Family Search, Ancestry.com, tend to, well, I think they began with US records and moved into Western European records in related countries, Australia, South Africa, those countries. They are now moving into African, Asian, Latin American countries more and more. So you're seeing more records up than you would have, say, a decade ago. But it's still, heavily weighted towards the Western European and United States countries.
Now, I'm pretty sure, if I could just step in, that it was on Family Search that I found this PDF, which is, let's see, it seems like it's very old. Look at this, revised 1976. So, but nevertheless, this has got some really valuable information because the things that I'm interested in, record, when records started being collected, that's not going to change.
Yeah.
So I like this table where it says the censuses. Okay. And I saw in the chat that Yoke was commenting that there's a lot of Japanese influences on Taiwanese culture. And the reason for that is that Japan occupied Taiwan from 1895 to 1945. So that's another twist. For instance, my father had a Japanese name that he used in school and official documents that was distinct from his Chinese name. And I remember the first time I saw that, I was very confused. And then I researched more and, it became clear what was going on.
Yeah. And this table is fantastic because look at all those records that are available, genealogical records. And this is stuff that you're not going to find. You're not going to find this everywhere, but it is out there. And the more we can find this stuff and add it to our links page,
right,
the more people are going to get help with this. But the information is there. When I started working with the team on the 15 nations, my first instinct was, well, there's not going to be records in those countries. But they were. In every country we visited, the records were there. You just had to figure out where to find them. Now, again, if you're doing Afghanistan, the records may be there, but the Taliban may not be sharing records at the moment. So that adds some challenges. But there are records there. And another thing, as you mentioned with the Japanese, et cetera, a lot of these countries were overseen by other countries during various times in their history. And I know when we did India, for example, a lot of the records were in London because it was a British territory, and all the records, census records, et cetera, from India were not in India. They were in London. So, if a country may not have the most accessible records right now, it could very well be that the records are being held in a different country.
Right.
So that's where the history is important. I'll also say what you were mentioning, the names. I was doing a little research on Taiwan before the show. I discovered that prior to 1913, they didn't have last names officially. And there was a law passed that said everybody had to have a name. And so people chose their name often based on, occupation, where they live, certain traits. So you can sometimes tell a little bit about or hypothesize a little bit about your family's origins if you know what their name means. But what I also found out that was interesting is that if you were a civil servant working for the government, the president got to pick your name.
Huh.
The citizens in general got to pick their own name unless they work for the government, and then the president got to pick their name for them.
Huh.
So that was interesting.
Very much. Yeah.
Okay, so did you have any more to say on family search? Okay.
No,
So
I think Family Search Wiki is an incredibly rich.
And we should say it's not just country information. You can look up census records, and you can look up birth certificates, and it'll tell you,
right.
You know, I think I wrote down here, they have over 1,000 topics, over 250 country topics.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information over there. If you're not familiar with it, if you're doing genealogical research, you need to become familiar with that because it's a great resource. Now, Ancestry is a little different. It's somewhat hit and miss. Most of their world documents you're going to have to pay a membership to access. So it's a little bit of a limitation there for some people. My recommendation is if you don't have, if it's not a year-long project you're working on and you can get in and out, just do a month-long membership, get in, get the records you need, and then close out. I don't do a lot of worldwide research for my own family. So I have a year-round membership with Ancestry, but I only add the world membership about maybe twice a year. And I get in and do all my world research and then step out. So I'm not paying for months that I'm not using.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to be on it all year, you get a discount if you sign up for the year. But if you're not going to be doing the research, the discount doesn't really matter. So Ancestry, again, heavily on the Western European, but it has more and more worldwide records. What I would do is you go to the card catalog, the general card catalog, and there'll be a search box. You can search by the title first. I put in the name of the country, you put in Taiwan, and it'll come up with any records that have Taiwan in the name. So those would be your most obvious resources. If that doesn't give you what you need, you can put it in the general search and it'll give you any documents that have Taiwan in the description. Now, that's going to get you things like find a grave, some really broad categories, but that's still, that still might prompt some thinking that you hadn't thought. You might not have thought to go to find a grave, but if they have Taiwanese graves at Find a Grave, Ancestry will let you know that. So it's not the most beneficial site for worldwide research outside of, again, Western European, but you find some treasures there that you may not have known. Somebody may have gone in and transcribed some Taiwanese census records, and they may have them. So
worth a look. Yeah.
Cindy's list, most people are probably familiar with it. She basically collects links. She's been doing it for decades, and she collects links to various genealogical sites. Some of them are are sites that are not necessarily genealogical, but can be utilized for genealogy. So things that, again, you might not have thought of. She categorizes them. Generally, she categorizes them by continent. And then within the continent, if a country has enough resources, she'll give an individual page for, so she might, have a China category. Some of the bigger countries, if she has enough links, she'll give that. They may not, again, all be genealogical. They may have to do with language, history, culture, but it's definitely worth a try, seeing what she has. Then next on the list, we have World Gen Web. World Gen Web's been around a long time, and I'm not quite sure how well managed it is. It's really hit and miss. It's kind of like a wiki, but people adopt a country and then they develop the pages, kind of what we're doing over at WikiTree. But I find, in my experience, the vast number of countries are very underdeveloped. But again, every once in a while, I hit on a country where they have really interesting resources. They started out with US GenWeb, which has a link to each of the 50 states, and then within that, each of the counties within the states. And that's really cool if you're looking to do American research. But for the world, the global resources, the World GenWeb, all you need to do is type in your country in place of world. So instead of World GenWeb, look for Taiwan GenWeb, and it'll take you to that page. Again, for a lot of the countries, I didn't see a lot of value on them, but there are some countries that have some really good resources. So you just have to give it a try and see what you find. The Library of Congress, I hadn't thought of this until we did our 15 nations, but the Library of Congress, which is the United States Library of Congress, but it's open to anybody around the world. You can go to their website. They have information from all over the world. They have documents from all over the world. And they have what they call reading rooms. So they have an Asia reading room, an Africa reading room, and you can go in and see what they have in terms of documents there. They have literally millions of pieces of material that you can research. The thing with I'm sorry, the Library of Congress also for some places produces pamphlets, and those are online. You can get them hard copy, but they also are online. So for some countries, and it's just a matter of I guess how much interest people have as to whether they come up with a document or not. But you'll find a Taiwanese genealogy pamphlet potentially, and it'll tell you all about their resources and how to do research. I'd say I found probably maybe a third of the countries that I've looked at so far have had pamphlets. So there's a lot of them, but it's not every country. Some it's more broader. It may be a pamphlet on researching in Southeast Asia, and it covers several countries. Researching in the Middle East, those kinds of things. So it's not always country by country. But again, there's some really good resources there, whether you're a US citizen or not, you can still access the library. And even again, if you're not doing US research, they have tons of research tons of materials from all over the world.
Great. And
it's not all genealogy. It's
broader, but that in the broader context informs good genealogy.
Yeah. And then for every country, I've added the National Archives and the National Library. I have yet, and I think I've said I've done about 70 countries. I have yet to find a country that does not have their National Archives and their National Library online with records available. Now, Afghanistan does have National Archives. They have 400 records in their archives due to all the damage from the war. That's all that remains. But nonetheless, they do have archivists. They do have historians there. So this is the next piece that I'd like to recommend. Don't trap yourself online. A lot of research that you're going to need to do is going to have to be done offline. So take these sources such as the National Archives. Now, you can do email, but write a letter to the archives, write an email to the archives and say, what can you do for me? A lot of times, just like when in the US, I'm sorry, there's my phone. In the US, we do county research. If you're in Los Angeles County or some of the major counties, you may not get real hands-on attention from the archivists there. But if you're in an obscure rural community somewhere, they're sitting there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for somebody to call that they can help. So I think a lot of these international archives, libraries, etc., you probably find the same experience, that there's people that would be thrilled to help you out with your research. You don't know, but it's worth giving it a try. But don't feel if it's not online that you have nowhere to go. Go contact an expert. Another recommendation is contact your local university and talk to their history department. Find out if they know anything about records wherever it is you're researching. but find experts who know where the records are and ask them. Find out what's available, and track them down. But there's not a place in the world that doesn't have some record somewhere. You just have to know how to access them.
Absolutely. And let's see, our last one, National Central Library of Taiwan.
Yeah.
And they have a YouTube channel, which I've already subscribed to.
And you should have on your computer a translation button for the internet. So a lot of these sites you may find are not written in English, but your browser should have a button somewhere that you can click on that'll translate the page for you and present it in English so you can read it.
Yeah.
And you look down there, if you go back to where you just were.
Yep.
Not only do they have the library, but if you scroll down to the bottom, well, you look at those tabs up there at the top, but also there at the bottom. Their online catalog, their digital library, theses and dissertations. There could be some amazing information in there. So the last thing, we're already at 1 o'clock. We've got a little bit over time here, but the last thing I want to say there is you may not be able to find the names and dates for all of your ancestors, particularly going back past the 19th or 20th, 19th centuries. If you, as I was saying to Betsy earlier, if you want to find your Taiwanese ancestor who lived in the 1400s, there may not be particularly if he was a farmer in some rural community, may not be a whole lot of documents you're going to be able to access there. But you can still, by pulling a history together, you can still put a story together and get an idea of where your ancestors came from, what their lives were like. Study the community, study the the culture of the time. Was it was it an independent nation? Was it a kingdom? Was it occupied by the Japanese? Was it whatever? I've done that with the story I'm writing on my own family. I go back to the DNA, and I know that my family was from England, but I can kind of tell the story of how they got to England. I don't know the names of the people that came over to England, but I know based on their genetic history where they came from, and I know when those groups of people came to England, so I can kind of give a time estimate on when they probably immigrated. I use that word in my narrative, probably, possibly, could have, hypothesize. I don't state it as fact, but you can put an interesting story together on your family, even if you don't have names and dates and specific places. So I think that probably wraps up our second first episode. I would like to ask if anybody has any recommendations for topics. We're going to be doing this once a month, so I've got 10 more topics I need to come up with before the end of the year. I've got a few ideas, but if anybody has anything that they would like to know on doing research in other countries, we'll try to keep it broad enough that it applies to any country. But we can talk about specific regions and stuff, etc. And again, if anybody's interested in signing up to host a country, let me know. If you just want to be a member, let me know that. If not, and you just want to go over and browse, the site is open. Go over there and look around and maybe learn a few things about some countries you didn't know anything about. So I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate you joining me today, Betsy.
Of course.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I don't see any questions here in the chat room. So we will wrap it up with that. And we will see you, I don't know the date, but early. Do you know the date?
March 18th. It'll
March
be another Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern.
Excuse me. Yes. That will be after Roots Tech.
Yep.
Betsy and I will both be at Roots Tech early in the month, but we will be back and have our next episode for you. So again, thank you everybody for showing up, and we will see you next month.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. Bye, everyone. Thank you.